Yay Networks.
Do you think that it's something that narcissism is, are you born with it? Is it like nature versus nurture, or is it genetic?
You're not born with it. It's not genetic. If you want to make that argument, all babies are narcissistic because it's feed me when I want, pick me up when I want, or I'm going to scream, right? And babies aren't narcissistic. Babies need attachment and care. That's the nature of human infancy. So people are not born narcissistic.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Happily Ever Amber. This podcast is dedicated to helping you find your happily ever after, even through breakups, relationships, all different types of relationships, divorce, and just everyday life. I am here with you on this journey to help you, enlighten you, empower you through those relationships and your personal growth. So on today's episode, we have Dr. Ramani, and I am so excited because she is a fantastic psychologist. Her YouTube is insane, and everyone should check it out. On today's episode, we talk about the hidden shadows, which is narcissist. This episode really, really hit me hard. I've learned a lot. So whether you're in a toxic relationship, and that relationship could be in the workplace, it could be family, it could be friends, it could be your neighbor, it could be just about anyone. If you're dealing with ongoing issues or you're seeking to understand a little bit more about narcissist, this episode is for you. So sit back, and I would love to hear from you guys what you learned from this episode because it's a good one. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. It's so nice to meet you, see you. Yeah.
One of the first things that I wanted to ask you for the viewers, right? What's the definition of a narcissist? Like, let's just start from the foundation.
Yeah, let's go right from the basics, okay? So a narcissist, or I prefer narcissistic person, so we're describing their personality, is a person who has a narcissistic personality. Doesn't mean they have a disorder. Let's not do any of this NPD stuff. It just means they have a narcissistic personality. And when a person has a narcissistic personality, they have variable, sort of low empathy. They're grandiose, they're arrogant, they need lots of attention, so they're constantly seeking attention and validation. They're entitled, they're very selfish and egocentric, they're superficial, they're hostile, they envy other people, they're vain, they can be very controlling. And the way they show up, though, is as very manipulative. They gaslight. They take advantage of other people. They're constantly status seeking. They're not accountable. They don't take responsibility. They blame other people. They lie. They don't control their emotions well when they're disappointed. That is a narcissist.
I feel like we live in a very narcissistic world.
We do.
What you just described.
We do. We really, and it's getting worse. And while I'd never argue that social media causes narcissism, it's created a petri dish where the bacteria gets to grow really quickly. So it's changed the game. Whereas there have always been narcissistic people, but having this sort of tool that's designed for validation seeking has completely made them unhinged.
Do you think that there's a specific industry that kind of breeds more narcissist?
I think that there are specific industries that either foster narcissists, enable narcissists, or where narcissists flourish. And those would be things like politics, corporate leadership, law, high-end academia, media for sure, athletics, entertainment.
Oh, I know the entertainment world all so well when it comes to narcissists. Do you think that they ever change? Is there any hope that, like, if someone, it's especially if you know someone's a narcissist and there's love there for that person?
Yeah. Well, I think that what's going to happen is that you are loving someone and you have to understand what the limitations will ever be in a relationship with them. So change is a funny thing, right? If I lost a pound, that's a change. Does it change my appearance? No. Does it change how my clothes fit? No. Does that make sense? So there's change, small c change, and there's big C change. And so small c change is, I mean, a therapist might notice. They'll say, my narcissistic client showed up on time 3 weeks in a row. That's very unlike them. But they still may be gaslighting their partner, cheating on them, lying to them. Do you see what I'm saying? So the changes of that other stuff, that's big C change. Small change might be losing a pound, saying thank you a few more times, maybe even showing up on time. So the amount of change that we could see in a narcissistic person in the vast majority of cases is not sufficient to heal the wounds of a relationship. In other words, they've already done so much harm to a person that the other person might even say, okay, yeah, you changed. Great. You're a little bit better. They're never going to get to fully healthy. We don't tend to see that. And more often than not, the best way to view it is as a rubber band. If we take an elastic band, we can stretch it out, right? It can actually become 2, 3, 4, 5 times its size, but we have to hold it. As soon as we put the rubber band down, it goes back to its original size. So while the narcissistic person either is invested in proving they can change, continuing to go to therapy, trying to prove something, try to win someone over, whatever it may be, the rubber band will be stretched. But that can't be forever, right?
Right. I mean, I think I know through my experience dealing with narcissistic people in my life, it's you see changes, and then you in the beginning of a relationship, there's like hope. You're like, oh, okay. And then you notice patterns, like they're really good for a little while, and then they're really bad. And then you pick up these patterns, and then you're like, okay, you get smart, and you know, okay, you're good for 2 or 3 months, but when that 4th month comes around, it's all going to go back to the original behavior, or the patterns, or the misbehaviors towards the other person. Do you think that it's something that narcissism is, are you born with it? Is it like nature versus nurture, or is it genetic?
You're not born with it. It's not genetic. If you want to make that argument, all babies are narcissistic because it's feed me when I want, pick me up when I want, or I'm going to scream, right? And babies aren't narcissistic. Babies need attachment and care. That's the nature of human infancy. So people are not born narcissistic. The only thing we have close to a sort of inborn piece of this is something we call temperament. And temperament is, for lack of a better way to put it, it's like the biological part of personality. And a good part of that is inherited. So you might even see that somebody has a mannerism, a quirk that a family member they've never met, a grandfather or grandmother who passed might have had, right? And so, but they have that quirk, and that might be more temperamentally linked. But temperament is, there are children with easier temperaments. They soothe easily. They're huggers. They're cooperative. They're agreeable. They're compliant. All the things we want kids ideally to be because they're easier. Then there are kids with more difficult temperaments. They're more difficult to soothe. They cry a lot more. They're more demanding. They're often more agitated. They're more high activity. They might act out a bit more. Those kids have a double disadvantage. That temperament is not, it often predicts poorer outcomes later in life, but that temperament is also, these kids are always getting in trouble, right? So stop that, sit down. Why are you doing that? Oh my gosh, again. Okay, why can't you be more like your sister? That kind of thing. Now, you take that kid with that difficult temperament, that vulnerability, that if you want to call it biological, and they're in an environment that's really invalidating, where there's attachment disruptions, inconsistent caregiving, unavailable caregivers, adversity, chaos, maybe even trauma or abuse. That's when you really kind of light the match on a higher likelihood of narcissism. The difficult temperament plus the invalidating background. That's one pathway, but that's not by any means the only pathway. The other pathway is what I call sort of the spoiled, overindulged pathway, which are kids who are told they do nothing wrong. They're not held accountable. They're told they're more special than any other kid. They're smarter than every other kid, that they shouldn't have to wait in line with the other kids. They are much too special. They should get everything they want. And those hyper-indulged kids who never are taught that they have to regulate, who always get their way, that's another pathway to narcissism. And if a child has narcissistic parents, they are going to sometimes mirror that behavior. So when they see the parent who's always impatient or always on their phone or always being demanding or entitled, or everything has to be their way, or very controlling, or snapping at the server in the restaurant, or snapping at the teacher, or yelling at the coach, some children may mirror that. But here's where I want to give a caveat or warning. Those pathways I described all are predictors of narcissism, but the vast majority of people who have those pathways, the invalidating traumatic childhood or the overindulged childhood or the narcissistic parent, don't become narcissistic. So this is a developmental story that can really only be told accurately backwards. If I'm a betting person and you show me a kid with a tough temperament who's got invalidating parents, I'll put some money down on that bet, but I'm not going to put a lot because there's too many other things that could intervene. The kid may turn out to be an addict, but not necessarily narcissistic, that kind of thing. It's going to be a tough ride for that kid, but it may not necessarily be narcissism. And from a treatment perspective, it's important to remember, I frankly believe that the folks who come up through that more adversity-oriented pathway, the neglect, the inconsistency, the poor attachment, maybe even trauma, and that results in their adult narcissism, I actually think you have a greater chance of doing treatment with them, focusing on trauma-informed stuff, like really cutting through the core of the trauma. You might be able to get more meaningful change in them than the spoiled children model, where I don't think if you get a spoiled child narcissist, forget about it.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. So the holidays are in full swing, and that brings up a lot of emotions. And sometimes talking to family is not the best idea, especially when we're talking about other family members or even talking about friends. So I personally love having a space where I could sit down in an enclosed room, one-on-one with my therapist, and just emotionally dump all of my issues that I'm having, whether I need strategies, whether I need coping mechanisms, whether I need ideas, whether I literally need to sit down with a piece of paper and pen and write things down that I like, these quick responses when something happens or I get triggered or I see something that I don't like that maybe someone else has done. Going to therapy is the best solution for me in those cases. And yeah, sometimes we just have to remove ourselves from the environment and sit one-on-one with this therapist or a therapist. And that is why I just love BetterHelp. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's super convenient, it's flexible, which is so great because the holidays are usually chaotic, and it's suited to fit your schedule. So you just have to fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist, and you could switch therapist anytime you want for no additional charge. So in this season of giving, give yourself what you need this year with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/HEA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/HEA. Happy holidays. So what about, and I'm sure there's, maybe the data's not there yet, but what about two divorced parents, right? And I feel like kids that come from divorce, you usually have one parent that's like maybe spoiling than the other, and then you have one that lays down the law. I mean, is it kind of, from what I've been told is that the kids will eventually and always mimic they want structure, right? So they'll go to the parent that is a little more, has boundaries, rule setting, because that's what these kids need. They need structure. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
So not all divorces involve a parent that's narcissistic, right? So let's keep that clear, right? So there's some divorces where people, they grow out of a marriage, pressures, stresses get to be too much. And two people may decide we were so much better as friends, but let's co-parent these kids. And frankly, they do a lot better than a lot of mediocrely married people do together. Absolutely. If you want to view it that way. So there's it's almost like the sanity of the two people involved matters whether or not they're married. And so, and like I said, staying in a toxic marriage or staying in an unfulfilled marriage is also not a great model to show a child, right? So what you're describing really only applies when you do have an antagonistic narcissistic parent, and then the other parent is not antagonistic and narcissistic, right?
Right.
When you see those divorces, it can get really tricky because the narcissistic parent might be quite vindictive. They may be, they constantly sort of poking the other parent. Well, I'm going back to court. I want this custody. This was not the year you got Thanksgiving. I'm not going to pay for a pair of shoes, on and on and on. It's also, this is where you might see sort of the Disneyland parent, right? The parent who's like, I'm going to take them to the movies. We're going to go to a theme park. Over their spring break, I'm going to take them skiing and then to the beach and then to the moon. And meanwhile, the other parent's like, oh gosh, we have to do SAT prep, or we have to go do the doctor's appointments, or, we're going to have bedtime. We're going to have limits. Sometimes what you'll have is a setup where the more Disneyland-esque parent, if you will, is just sort of letting them stay up all night and eat whatever they want. And then the other parent, who keeps more of the structure and boundaries, receives that child who is completely kind of dysregulated. Now they have to bring them back down. And it can sometimes make that limit-setting parent a bit of a downer, right? They'll say, at Dad's house, we can watch video games they'll play video games all the time. Listen, in many, many cases, I think when children are young, they like consistency and like predictability. Mm-hmm. All bets start going off in adolescence, because let me tell you, an adolescent can be bought off. And so if the parent who is all about fun and no limits and no structure, and maybe the more narcissistic parent says, I'm going to buy you a car. And the other parent's like, no, I don't think they should earn the money for the car. And like, well, you don't have anything to say about my money. I'm buying this kid a car, or I'm going to pay your rent, or I'll cover the tuition if you go to my alma mater, or whatever it may be. The minute that kid comes out of college, it could be, I'll be happy to help you get that apartment. I'll happy to pay for this, happy to pay for that. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone is that easy, but some kids may view the parent who's not narcissistic as sort of like, oh my gosh, it's always so difficult for you, and blah, blah, blah. And then they might even fall into the, oh, you've always hated, and especially if the narcissistic parent is saying negative things. Oh, you're always such a downer. So it's not, listen, I have worked in the tragic place of many people who were married to a narcissistic person. They got divorced, they had kids, and the kids ended up gravitating to the narcissistic parent. And it's an absolute devastation for the parent who really tried to do everything right, and often with one hand tied behind their back because they were constantly on defense because of the narcissistic parent.
So how can you protect yourself against a narcissist? Like, obviously knowing that you can't change that person. Mm-mm. What's the best defense? What are the best boundaries and practices that you recommend?
So the most important thing is radical acceptance. They're really not going to change, right? And that's the hardest part of all, because everyone thinks like, yeah, they're not going to change, but it's exceptionalism. Like, I could probably do something here. I mean, I'm sure we could figure it out, right? Mm-hmm. It's really having radical acceptance. And maybe it's not as extreme as they'll never change, but whatever change they're able to engage in is never going to be enough to make this a healthy relationship. Mm-hmm. That then, what follows from that is realistic expectations. Most people, many people in narcissistic relationships are not in a position to walk away from the relationship. It doesn't matter if it's a long-term committed relationship or a marriage. It could be a parent. It could be a sibling. It could even be a job, colleague, boss, that kind of thing. And people are saying, I am not in a situation where I'm going to walk away from my parents. I feel some responsibility, or I don't want to lose other members of my family, or I can't afford a divorce, or whatever it may be. Not everyone feels like they might still love the person. Some people say, my parents are absolutely wretched to me, but I really value family. There's no judgment. Anyone's going to have their reasons. In those cases, realistic expectations are everything. And when a person goes through radical acceptance and slides into realistic expectations, there's a real grief, because there was always that hope it would change. And once it really is confirmed, like, no, whatever no change here is going to happen that will ever turn this around. Mm-hmm. People will say it was as though the bottom got pulled out, because they realized how much they were holding on to that. So when that goes away, people for a while will say they feel lost, they feel angry, they feel sad. But there is a day then, they round the corner. So then they can see the hope. But there doesn't mean you're leaving the relationship. It just means that you're like, now this person is going to criticize me. This person is never going to be my cheerleader. This person's not going to believe in me. This person's going to make fun of me. This person is going to lie to me. This person may keep cheating on me, whatever it is. What I've often said to people is one thing I'd love to do is take away surprise from you. So when the narcissistic person does the mean thing that they've always done, and you're like, oh, I can't believe it. I'd love to take away the where rather I'd want people to say, and here we go.
And speaking of that moment, it's like, because there's so much hope. So being, in a codependent relationship, and I am codependent or was, it's you hang on to hope, right? Mm-hmm. You hope that person will change. And that's unfortunately is like and correct me if I'm wrong, the narcissist will seek out those vulnerable people who they just, who are maybe weak-ish at the time or young-ish.
Nope, not necessarily. And I think that's a common misconception that that narcissistic people always prey on people they know they can manipulate. The diabolic quality of narcissism is that they can manipulate anyone. And if I had $1 for every person I have worked with clinically who actually walked into that relationship and they said, when I met this person, I was at the top of my game. I loved my career. I loved where I lived. I was surrounded by friends. I traveled. I had this great life. I thought I met this cool person. And they'll say, I am I don't even know, I recognize who that person was. This person ruined me. So narcissistic people look for people who give them supply. Praise, encouragement, help, cheer them on, tell them they're great, stick around. But they also like having people who forgive them, give them a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance. And it's not just people who are struggling who do that. I think too many of us were brought up on a steady diet of forgiveness and second chances and, cast the first stone and all that other stuff. And the challenge then becomes is that very healthy people are saying, I can't be that. I mean, I'm not going to be that hard-nosed. I'm going to, all right. So they screwed up a few times. They've been stressed at work and they have a lot going on and they had a really tough father and they had a tough child. And then the excuses just pile up. And so sometimes the best people out there who are strong and compassionate and respectful and nice and smart and successful, they get into these relationships, but because they're decent human beings, they keep making allowances for this person's behavior. At the same time, they're being manipulated and gaslighted and confused. And there's enough good days in there to confuse them.
Guys, let's spend our time this month shopping for gifts and sipping hot cocoa, maybe with a little whipped cream and some sprinkles, and not get stuck in the checkout lines. So if you sign up for HelloFresh, you get everything you need to whip up a fresh, tasty meal delivered to your door. Okay, it's super easy. You just have to choose your recipes online, select a delivery date that is convenient for you and your family, and relax knowing that dinner is on its way. Let's make hosting this holiday a joy rather than a hassle and stressful environment, and HelloFresh is here to help. Okay, so you could choose a crowd-pleasing charcuterie board that's super easy to whip up, or maybe an Instagram photo-worthy dessert. It's easy just to add these party pleasers to your weekly order, and you save so much time. It has over 45 recipes and more than 100 seasonal add-on items to choose from every week. So it's easier than ever just to find something that everyone will enjoy. I'm obsessed with HelloFresh. Do you know what I love about HelloFresh? Is my kids are actually learning to cook. Kids don't know how to cook. Full stop. Like literally, I'm just teaching my daughters how to make a PB&J. That's ridiculous, okay? We need to bring back home economics, but instead of them teaching at school, let's teach our kids at home. And HelloFresh makes it super easy. These meals you could whip something up in 15 minutes, right? Kids don't even have the attention for more than 20 or 30. So these meals are super easy. The directions are step by step-by-step directions, which is another great learning tool for your kids. And your meals can be done and quick and easy, and you can actually sit down and have a meal that everyone will eat, including your kids, because it is proven when your kids make the food, they will try it. So check out HelloFresh, you guys. I love it. Go to HelloFresh.com/HEA free and use the code HEA free for free breakfast for life. 1 breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life, you guys, at HelloFresh.com/HEA free with code HEA free. Okay, so in dealing with a narcissist, do we talk about this? Some of the steps that we could do to set boundaries.
Well, so some of the steps would be, one easy one, like I said, in having realistic expectations is don't tell them about your life. Don't tell them the good things that have happened to you. Don't tell them the bad things that have happened to you. What do I mean by that? Let's say you get a promotion, okay, at work. The temptation for a lot of people, whether it's a narcissistic parent, friend, partner, is I'm going to tell them they're going to see I'm cool. Like, right, you're always trying to win the narcissist over. Huge mistake. They should never be the first to know. You have to have what I always call Rolodex is an old word, but that list of people
I know
on
what
your
that
phone,
is.
right? But that list of people in your phone who really empathically and unconditionally get you and see you. So when you text them the good news and say, hey, I got that promotion, I'm like, oh, and it'll be emojis and, oh my gosh, I love you. I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do this. Yeah, I hope everyone has at least one of those people. In an ideal world, you have 3 or 4, and you get the love. You get the good feels when something good's happened to you. Mm-hmm. After all of that happens, then and only then tell the narcissistic person. So when they say something like, okay, so what? I've had a bad day. So what, am I supposed to be happy for you now? Or they feel jealous, or they feel competitive, or whatever it is they feel, they can have their mean, invalidating reaction, but at least you've had some of the uplift. That's one thing. Don't share the bad news. What could that be? That could be anything from the dishwasher is busted to I can't show up for this dinner this weekend to I've been diagnosed with a medical condition. It could be anything. And why wouldn't you want to tell them the bad news? Because narcissistic people are inconvenienced by your bad news. They don't want to hear it. They want to live in their little grandiose fairyland where there are no problems and the dishwasher fairy will come and fix everything. So they don't want to have to deal with grown-up life. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to hear your bad news. So people will say, well, they're my partner. I said, I get they're your partner, but you bringing the news of whatever it be, from dishwasher to can't do something to you even getting something where you're vulnerable, where you're sick, they're going to make it about them. What do you want me to do about it? Oh my gosh, you're always wasting money. It's your fault. You picked out that dishwasher. Like, oh great. Now do I have to take time off in the middle of the day to take you to the doctor? That's devastating for people. Mm-hmm. Same thing. You go to those people who you know you have your back. They may not be able to do anything about the dishwasher, but you might say, oh, can you believe my dishwasher is dead? And your friend might say, oh, I'm so sorry. And that you'll get empathy. And then they might say, I got a good guy who fixes appliances, whatever. Mm-hmm. If you have something more dire, like a medical issue, you take it to these people who actually have your back, who will actually show you empathy. And then and only then, the narcissistic person is on a need-to-know basis. So that leaves people wondering, what exactly am I allowed to share with the narcissist? I can't share the good news. I can't share the bad news. You can share the neutral news. And that's the weather. Can you believe it's this hot? This daylight savings, the sun is setting earlier. Whoa, did you see that the neighbors painted their mailbox blue? Somebody once said to me, they're like, Doc, that's it? Because they're like, I get it. I realize that those are the only topics I can talk about. And they said to me, but that's not really a relationship. And I said to them, but it never was.
Ugh.
This is just putting the confirmation on it.
Mm-hmm. And that's really hard to hear sometimes.
It's very, very hard to hear. Because when they do this, no good, no bad, and they start seeing like, whoa, yeah, everything's kind of calming down, and they only stick to the weather and stuff. Now, here's the thing. Got to give the narcissistic folks some credit here. They're actually very, in a strange way, despite their lack of empathy, socially intelligent in many cases. They in a weird way can read a room. They sense the change in the weather. In fact, narcissistic people are more threat sensitive than a lot of other folks. Like they sense the change because they need validation. So if the temperature is changing, so they might notice like, what's with you? Like if you don't even talk about anything anymore. Like now you're boring. Right. And one of the struggles in the narcissistic dynamic is they often bait. They love a fight. A fight is actually where they're at their best. They're really good fighters. And so if you're not giving them the fight, they're going to go looking for it.
That's really interesting.
You know, I was having this conversation with someone today. This whole conversation about boundaries has actually gotten really dark. Everyone's like, set boundaries. Boundaries are great. I love boundaries. What about when the person says, not talking to you is my boundary. Not helping you is my boundary. Not dealing with your phone calls is my boundary. So this person is extolling these boundaries, but they've actually ceased to be a meaningful person in someone's life. When is it a boundary and when is it just sort of not having to show up?
That's really interesting. I think what I have learned in dealing with people in my life is saying, I'm putting up a boundary until I could figure out how I could, not be triggered, right, when I talk to you, or not know how to resolve conflict, right? That's what people should be doing instead of doing what you were just describing is avoiding the situation and really working on ourselves to know how to be able to keep cool while we're talking.
Correct. Keep cool, learn to regulate, but it also becomes a sense of there are consequences to every choice, right? So if a person says, I need time, I need all this time to figure things out, the other person may disappear. That's the nature of the beast. Not everyone's going to wait. And I think that for a narcissistic person, they actually think everyone can be on ice when they're ready. And then they're always a little bit surprised when some people aren't ready. They're like, yeah, no, you haven't shown up for a long time. Peace. We're not.
Yeah. I think that happens like, dealing with someone that you love or in your family or a friendship that is around narcissism, but then dealing it in the workforce is a little bit trickier because, a lot of people rely on their jobs and they need that paycheck, but then they're having to please their boss. And then, the boss has some sort of you start picking up on these little narcissistic personality traits and you're like, it's tough for some people.
Oh, it's very difficult. And I think workplace situations really raise a lot of issues because especially if it's a boss, there's a power differential. If it's a colleague, it could be, you don't feel safe at work. If it's a direct report, you might be constantly on eggshells, right? Someone who actually is a subordinate to you in the workplace. But what's challenging about the workplace is our labor laws and workplace laws really aren't set up to protect people who are experiencing emotional abuse in the workplace. They really have to be able to show that what's happening in the workplace is resulting in that they're being demoted. They're not getting the same assignments. They're making less money. But in the absence of that, it's very difficult to use any kind of systematic approach to addressing this. I mean, for some people, there's all kinds of workarounds. You have to document everything. You get mentorship. You get help. There is a point at which some people will say, listen, this is the most miserable job. I'm bummed out, but I'm 3 years from retirement. And they will white knuckle those last 3 years. But in those 3 years, they might have a side gig or a hobby or a weekend thing, or they'll think of something else they do and they'll say like, this other thing I do, I love, but I got to get that pension or that whatever, that retirement benefit or whatever it is. There's different reasons people might stick in something. They may start looking and might take a while. Some people take a pay cut to leave these kinds of situations. Some people do entire career changes.
That takes a lot of courage though, especially in today's world.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I'm trying to think I literally got through all my questions, by the way.
Good.
I want to see that was amazing. is there anything that we could share with the audience that I have, haven't discussed yet in terms of narcissists? Is there anything you want to?
I think it's important for people to know that narcissism's on a spectrum. It's not you're a narcissist or you're not. I think that people want it to be black and white, but it's really on a spectrum. And at the mildest end of it, it's really almost like an immature, emotionally stunted, validation seeking, status seeking, vain, Instagram-y, look at me, this is where I'm eating dinner, YOLO, all this kind of stuff. And the people who, if you really try to turn to them in a significant moment, like I need help with something, they're sort of too shallow to be there for you, right? That's the mild end. These are not necessarily folks who are harmful. They're annoying. They're definitely not someone you can be in a long-term committed, meaningful relationship with, but let's say it's a sibling or a friend. You're like, I'm never going to take a problem to them, but they are harmless and I see them for what they are and it is what it is. At the extreme end, at the far more severe end, is where we see things like malignant narcissism, which is really straddles psychopathy, where we're seeing exploitativeness and coercion and cruelty and isolation and dynamics that can be dangerous and may even sometimes be accompanied by physical violence. People, obviously, you can imagine a relationship with a malignant narcissist is very different than a relationship with a mild narcissist whose biggest sin is like, look at my new handbag on Instagram. Those are very different experiences. Yeah.
It definitely is. My mind went to like Dateline. Not that I watch that stuff anymore because I literally I just can't. But like you, there's a huge difference between the sociopathic, behaviors and the look at me. I'm at Walt Disney World, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. And for our viewers and people listening, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is drramani.com. It's doctor-ramani.com. And obviously, we'll give you all that information. When you go to my website, you'll sort of find everything there. We have a monthly healing program for people who are experiencing narcissistic relationships that has workshops and Q&As and a community platform and journal prompts and guided meditations. So that's available for folks who really want to do a deeper dive into healing. I have a YouTube channel where we have 1,400 videos on narcissism, so you're going to pretty much find everything you need. I have a podcast, Navigating Narcissism, where we interview people who've had different kinds of narcissistic relationship situations, and they share about what that was like and how they healed. And we talk to experts and folks like that. And then I have a new book coming out called It's Not You. It comes out in February. You can pre-order it now. And it's really, it's all the other books about narcissism are always about the narcissist. This is a book for people who are healing from these relationships.
Oh, thank you so much. Let me just tell you, I appreciate you and everything that you're doing to help people understand narcissism and how to heal from it. And I'm so looking forward to this book. Thank you. I cannot wait to read it. So thank you.
I appreciate it so much. And I appreciate your time and your platform. Thank you.
See, I told you guys it was going to be a great episode. One of the things that I want you guys to do, not just listen to this episode one time, keep this episode bookmarked, send it to your friends and family, and let them know about this episode, because this is something, it was so insightful for me. So whether you're redefining your life, you're rediscovering, or you're rebuilding your life, this can apply to so many different areas. And so bookmark this episode, and whenever you have a day where you're really struggling, just listen. Listen to it in your car, listen to it while you take a shower, listen to it in your earbuds while you're cooking or cleaning. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcast, and I'll see you guys next time.
Yay Networks.